Hey everyone, welcome to Quick Hits. We're excited to bring you today's episode, where Ken and I have the pleasure of interviewing Alyssa Rapp. Alyssa is a powerhouse in the healthcare space, and we're lucky to have her as a board member of Health Data Movers. From launching her first company in the high energy world of Silicon Valley to shaking things up in healthcare, Alyssa's journey is an inspiring one. A Stanford GSB alum who knows a thing or two about leading with guts and innovation, Alyssa is all about breaking barriers and bringing her unique leadership style to healthcare, proving that great ideas can really make a difference. We're going to dive into how she entered the healthcare space, her thoughts on technology's role in healthcare, the importance of good communication, and the way she's influencing change.
Welcome everyone to another episode of Quick Hits. I'm your host, Ken Booth, joined as always by Tyler Smith. Tyler, how are you?
Great, Ken.
Glad to hear it. And we've got a special guest today. That is Alyssa Rapp. Alyssa, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Really glad to have you here. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your journey into healthcare?
So I, like Tyler, your wonderful CEO, was a Stanford GSB student several years prior to him, of course, from 2003 to 2005. And from there, I ended up launching my first company in Silicon Valley, which was a .com in the consumer products and luxury goods space. And that company I ran from '05 to 15. And when we exited that to a hedge fund, I took a couple of years to do advisory work, not in venture-backed operations, but in private equity-backed environments, both in San Francisco and in Chicago, where my husband and I are both from, in spite of having met at the GSB as well. And so in that time frame, I worked with two family offices, two private equity firms in two cities. That was still mostly consumer internet, but I found I really liked the speed and sport of PE more than venture. It suited me, and I liked that you were trying to maximize profitability growth and EBITDA. And I liked the fact that it sort of didn't matter if you're pink or purple or black or white or tall or short or man or woman. It was what you were measured against felt really objective to me, which was very different and starkly different, frankly, than the 10 years prior in Silicon Valley. And that's a whole different conversation for a whole different time. But it suffices to say that when Hal and I decided to move back to Chicago for family reasons in 17, I knew I wanted to therefore be a CEO again. Our girls were then 5 and 2, almost 3, and I was ready to take the helm, and I therefore started talking to just a couple friends in town and just a couple private equity firms, because I was still finishing a project actually in San Francisco for a San Francisco-based private equity firm, and still teaching even at Stanford, so doing a lot of flying even though we had moved back. And I ended up in a dialogue with Sterling Partners, who had started to morph from a private equity firm to a private equity firm family office hybrid, which didn't scare me. It scared a lot of operators, but didn't scare me because I'd worked with both family offices then and since, as well as private equity firms. And we started talking about a bunch of their very interesting early stage companies involving consumer products and consumables, just like I had done in the decade prior to moving home. And the irony was, while I talked to them about fancy sprinkles and coffee companies, they ended up taking public and all sorts of interesting things to me and to them. They ended up having a need for a turnaround CEO in healthcare, and an asset that had been orphaned by the partners who had sourced it because they'd left the firm. And it was the classic PE meltdown, right? Private equity firm buys company, founders aren't exited, disgruntled founders are still in the business while quote unquote professional CEO comes in. Professional CEO has mandate to build out professional team, and it's the J curve, and scale will ultimately arrive. And it just didn't happen. It started to be the unpleasant death spiral. So my job was to come in and figure out if there was a there still with value proposition, and then see if it could be turned around, and if it could, get it done. And I had zero experience in healthcare at that point, and I had my farthest scientific accomplishment was AP biology, and my husband, who is a biology major from Michigan, and my best friend from childhood, who's a ENT surgeon trained at Harvard and Stanford, all also almost laughed in my face, saying, "How in God's great earth are you going to do anything in healthcare, not because they questioned me, but just that I didn't have experience in it. And what I realized was that the principles that of leadership, I believed and teach that the principles of leadership transcend industry. And I had just completed 2.5 years of strategic advisory work for private equity firms. So the first 90 to 120 days of the job were actually the exact same thing I had done for the last several years. And I had to figure out, I'd run around the world and figure out if the customers thought there was value in the value proposition, if the company still had the hearts and minds of its employees, if the people and currently in leadership were the right people to take it forward, if those two first things were true, if there was a unique problem we were trying to solve in a unique way with the right team and talent. And the good news was is the customers needed us, and there were some extraordinarily talented people in the field. The bad news was is that it was also, what Sterling Partners had underwritten as a deal was not necessarily what was valued in the market at that point, and so a pivot and a strategic evolution was required, and therefore different players in the seats in a leadership level as well. And that so it ended up being a classic turnaround. And my foray into healthcare, in short, was not intentional or expected, but once I got in, I was I did the work to understand
Hmm.
really customer needs. And what I was most struck by after 3 years in the trenches and the turnaround was successful, we sold to a wonderful global strategic partner called Grupo Vitelmax, and they still own the company today. Um, I was itching to get back to my entrepreneurial roots, so I ended up leaving after my 1 year lockup and started on my next venture, which was a SPAC. But what I realized at the time about healthcare was that my decade plus in Silicon Valley as an operator was instructive in how powerful technology can be in driving costs out of the ecosystem and improving outcomes. And that's how I ended up investing in and bringing a tech through line to surgical solutions. And that's what ended up fueling my thesis at Healthwell Acquisition Corp of why we were pursuing literally dozens of healthcare technology companies with which to merge an IPO. And it's, of course, what brings me to the board of Health Data Movers, the power of technology to transform outcomes and drive efficiency and drive costs out of the system and in the US healthcare system.
Very nice. Wow. It's amazing. Just, we've interviewed several people that came from a, whatever background, and then they landed in healthcare and ended up making an impact. So it's wonderful to add you to that roster. So, when we look at the complexities of healthcare today, which you kind of alluded to, some unique problems, unique challenges, what do you maybe see as one of the most pressing or challenging issues that we face as a company or as a sector? And what's your philosophy when it comes to tackling challenges like this?
So, technology in healthcare has extraordinary opportunity and extraordinary challenge. It is still an industry where change is extraordinarily slow, and technology platforms are incredibly fragmented. And so while AI and data have enormous opportunities to improve outcomes and drive costs out of the system, I mean, the best example I can give you are some venture-backed companies of late that leverage AI to scan, for example, stroke patients' uh, brain scans.
Hmm.
And that's a perfect example where AI could be extremely powerful in helping routinize and catch and understand when something is when it's a nothing, when it's a TIA, a small stroke, when it's a potential risk of a huge stroke. And if all those images are coming through, you could have them funnel into what is down one road, which is not life threatening, and then, of course, raise the sound bells immediately and even faster if something might be.
Hmm.
So that's a perfect example of where technology and AI, particularly, could be extraordinarily helpful in the system and improving outcomes, saving lives, and saving cost. Problem is that because of how fragmented the solutions are and the platforms are, there is no singular standard, there's no singular solution. That means that there's wide array of discrepancy, even if everyone has done what they had to do in initially adopting EHRs, which became required in the law.
Hmm.
There's a very different degree to which technology is integrated into the patient journey. You probably are all yourselves as individuals have some healthcare interactions where it's completely seamless and you log in and pre-authorize on insurance and prepay as required for service, and others where it's still pen and paper at the point of entry. So it's just that range is so vast And that creates both risk in the system and inconsistent experiences throughout. So that's a huge challenge. It's a huge opportunity for potential players like health data movers and others, but it's also a huge challenge to the system. And of course, that the biggest challenge of all to the system is that it remains a sick care system, not a health care system,
Hmm.
where we are not investing enough from both. Individuals can choose to invest in preventative medicine and they can choose to invest their own hard dollars, but this is not a place where um, you can be sure you're going to have uh, preventative measures supported, let alone incentivized, and that's inherently flawed.
True.
It's really nice to talk about the ways that healthcare technology might be able to lead the way in some respects in AI applications. I was curious about a comment you said earlier, Alyssa, about bringing principles from other industries into healthcare. Having been in
Mhm.
healthcare, for the past, I guess, almost decade, are there principles or values in healthcare or even healthcare technology that could be applied to other industries and might benefit those industries which presently exist in our healthcare IT industry?
Of course, there are, and you know that probably even better than I, because you're in it day to day. I would also argue that the broader philosophy around technology innovation in Silicon Valley or any innovation is, you know, fail quickly. So innovate and test and learn, fail, test, learn, and improve. From a technology standpoint, that makes a ton of sense, right? Because you always want to make sure that you're iterating and you're learning quickly and adapting rapidly. You never want to be doing that, of course, conversely with people's lives and their healthcare delivery, right? So those two things are inherent conflict. I think that the idea of being nimble, though, and doing tests for systems to do tests with technology partners and to test what might work makes a ton of sense. I also think that when you know that there's a pain point internally where moving data or optimizing a narrow workflow would potentially have huge potential impact, that same rapid iteration mindset is what can be applied much more even to healthcare. It is starting to be, and players like Health Data Movers support it in doing so, but that can be done even in more and better. Um, and I would actually argue that in terms of the use of AI in the scanning example that I provided you, the healthcare has done a pretty remarkable job of already embracing AI
Hmm.
in very specific ways, probably better than many industries because of its overt power to improve outcomes and help doctors use it as a tool to aid in their decision making versus they don't feel fear being disintermediated. They feel like it will empower them, I believe, to make better decisions faster for their patients. So in that sense, whether it's robotic surgeries or these AI scans I keep referring to for stroke patients, I think that healthcare has done a very good job of leveraging technology advancements since inception, but certainly of late, better than others. And that's something that it's at the forefront of and needs to continue to do.
Is there any concern that government will slow down the progress of the use of AI in healthcare? Because they always kind of lag behind, right? Like, is there anything on the horizon that threatens to, in an effort to protect patients? Obviously, it,
Yeah.
it
So the answer is yes and no. In the companies I've looked at, both through Healthwell as well as beyond, I've been pretty surprised and impressed by whenever I see a company that's arguably using software as a medical device that would be regulated by the federal government and the FDA,
Mhm.
they're actually so far keeping pace, right? And able to think thoughtfully um, about the impact of these technologies on and patients and not totally block them. I've been pleasantly surprised by what I've learned and seen anecdotally. That doesn't mean I'm giving the government a carte blanche to regulate the space. I'm just suggesting to you that I've been pleasantly surprised by they haven't been blocking. They've been learning and adapting as well.
Mhm.
Again, that could change,
Okay.
but so far what I've seen has I've been more optimistic than I expected to be.
That's encouraging. We were talking before the call, and I mentioned that I'd been looking through your book, Leadership and Life Hacks, and
And think
number 27, which is about establishing thought leadership. What role do you think that thought leadership can play in kind of resolving some of the issues that you've seen as far as, all of these disparate solutions and everybody kind of heading in multiple directions at once? W-
I think it can play a powerful role, right? I mean, we're not Surgical Solutions. We were doing things that I found to be really innovative and moving the needle operationally for some of our partners. So we decided to codify some of those into white papers and use them as opportunities to put the spotlight on customers and our business processes and hopefully share insights in how you could optimize through third party partners things like efficiency, throughput, and again, and technology to drive costs out of the system and improve outcomes. Same theme.
Mhm,
And I think that thought leadership in the form of white papers, we had wonderful MD MBAs work on those with us, and Tyler knows that I would love to see that come out of Health Data Movers as well. I think it's really an important role to play in the ecosystem because you're doing two things. You're being generous, right?
mhm,
You're not sharing a trade secret per se, but you're sharing proprietary insights you have with others, hoping they can learn from them.
mhm.
And then if it turns out that through that thought leadership, you end up with more customers or stickier customers or new customers, that's all the better. But to be forced to distill things to writing, hence why I wrote a book, to be
Uh-huh.
fair, when you have to do that, you have to get conviction about what you believe and you have to be willing to be put it on paper and put a stake in the ground. And so doing that is I actually think really good for companies. It's really good for CEOs. And I think if what you're putting out there is impactful and notable, it's beneficial to the ecosystem.
How do we improve our ability
Yeah.
to communicate via writing?
I think it takes a good editor, right? And I think that sometimes you have to say, okay, this is a personal coaching goal of mine. Can someone in my organization help give me coaching feedback on, some of my communications in a heavy-handed way over the next 3 months, and then you just have more at bats. I just told you a 2-page investor letter this week, which was, an intense
Mhm,
and complex message. I let every single one of my directors edit it.
mm,
Why? Because more edits, more input, more pruning makes those kind of communications better. You just have to have someone edit your work.
got it.
And that's true for everybody on the planet. Doesn't matter if you are a New York Times bestselling author. Having someone else edit is a hugely important thing to making sure you're communicating your ideas the best that they can be.
This is actually making me think of GPT. And Ken, I know you're a huge fan. Alyssa, have you been using GPT or any AI tools in your writing recently?
It's funny you should ask. The answer is no, but we had a dinner last night with someone who's an aspiring MBA and is running a big GPT, platform for Microsoft. So we were brainstorming, not just for me, but with my husband, of how he could be using it for his work
Mhm,
in writing reports, not doing the work for him, but synthesizing data that he then edits. And for my work, I haven't started to use it on a routine basis, but where I hope to use it in the future is in terms of gathering data for hard research, right? I still do my own writing.
mhm. Highly recommended. Although I
Yeah, yeah, no, I totally supportive, just haven't done it yet. And then once you train it, this is what we were talking about with my husband last night. If he could upload all of his own reports and train it to talk and think like him with the same vernacular, then it's different. But I haven't. I'll walk before I run. I'll start using it for the
sure.
research, and then I'll shape it. And then it's actually a goal of mine to do that more in the next 12 months.
So we talked a lot about communication. What's another key element in leadership that you think is important to you that you've used to improve the healthcare space?
I think that when you take talented individuals who are passionate, who are mission driven and passionate about a vision of the company and work together to achieve it,
Mhm,
and share values, I think that all those great teams and great organizations can drive, great outcomes, both financially and from a value proposition standpoint.
mhm,
And I've seen that happen in numerous teams in the healthcare ecosystem. I saw it at Surgical Solutions. I've seen it for two companies for whom I'm on the board for Shore Capital Partners. And when you're driving value, you're driving it for patients and consumers and providers and investors and all key stakeholders, right?
mhm,
I've seen numerous healthcare organizations achieve those things. I've also seen how slow and stagnant and change resistant the system can be.
mhm.
You got to keep fighting the good fight.
Final question, and this one definitely you could take some time on, is what advice do you have for an individual who's really looking to make their mark in healthcare, regardless of their background? What advice do you have for them that you've learned with your journey?
I think that nothing meaningful is ever easy.
Mm,
It's just hard.
mhm,
It's hard work. Change is hard. Breaking through brick walls is hard.
mm,
Moving and improving is hard. And it's exciting when it works, but it's just not easy. So the fantasy that it's easy is got to be dispensed of, and the reality that to whom much is given, much is expected,
mhm,
and to make meaningful outcomes happen, you have to work your tail off. That's my advice, whether you're at a 65-person healthcare company or a 6,500-person healthcare company.
mm,
And all great leadership starts at the top with the mission, vision, and values that are meaningful and people can rally behind, and empowers people in their organization to be the best versions of themselves they can be.
mhm.
And that's what makes great teams. And that's what drives winning results. And it's necessary, not sufficient to do so. And that I've learned the hard way and the easy way.
In this post-COVID environment, as we're seeing hybrid work schedules, remote work schedules, teams that get together on some type of recurring basis, are there any nuances or hacks that you've seen for creating stronger bonds between teams in this current remote slash non-remote environment?
I mean, Tyler, that I believe in meeting live wherever and whenever possible. And I think that interconnectedness of human beings, and I've written about this in the book. I mean, breaking bread matters together, doing things outside the office matters together, connecting as human beings matters. And there are innumerable ways to do all those things. But you can't just sit in your silo in your home office on your Zoom and build the same level of trust and interdependence that you can in real life. It's simply not possible.
Right.
So you have to build relationships both through the work and outside of the screen. And that, no matter who you are and how old you are, will remain the truth. And people who are more old school will need to adapt to the more flexible work environment. People who are totally millennial Gen X and unwilling to get out of their pajamas and leave the house are missing out on huge amounts of opportunities for coaching and mentorship and personal growth.
Mhm,
You have to have both.
mhm,
And the people who are willing to embrace both are going to win. And the people who are going to be stuck in their home or stuck in their ways will not. They will dinosaur out because it's not tenable. Flexibility is what's required. And make no mistake about it. I believe that I had a flexible work environment of 3 days in and 2 days out. I also went into the office every day during COVID because how could I send my team into hospitals with COVID patients
Right.
and not go into a damn office myself? The pace of play has increased with flexible work
mhm.
environments. You are expected to be online 18 hours a day. And so the flexibility is required, but it doesn't give anybody excuse not to work their tails off. And if anything, I would argue the flexibility makes it even harder to have any semblance of balance, which is a very elusive concept and a whole different conversation for a different time. But it's no longer in this cookie cutter of how that gets achieved.
Right.
Grit is one of the HCM values, and I find you to be one of the grittiest people I know. You've got an unstoppable energy, and curious, are there mantras, or is it just an energy, or how is it that you bring so much to every day?
Part of it's hard wiring, and most of it's attitudinal. It's a choice
Mm,
to be positive. It's a choice to get up at 4:45 and work out at 5 in the morning. It's a choice to make breakfast for my children and bring my husband coffee in bed. It's a choice to, after I drop them off at school, to just attack the day. That's a choice. You get one life,
mm,
and it doesn't include a lot of hours. So that line in Hamilton, the musical of, why does he write like he's running out of time? Why do you give every day 115%? Because that's all you got.
Hmm.
It's a new day. It's a new opportunity. You never get to live it again. And that spirit is who I am at my core. It's what I hope I inspire in the people around me personally and professionally. And then it's my job, and that's a whole separate podcast, as Ken mentioned,
We'll
of,
do a
of,
part
of
two.
the
Absolutely.
tips and the hacks and the tricks and the traps, if you will, of how to do that. But fundamentally two things, and I've said this in almost every corporate speech I've ever given on this topic. The first is that you have to put your own oxygen mask on first. It is not anyone's responsibility but mine to make sure I am fueled and shored up, to eat cleanly, take care of yourself. You get one body to live in, do right by it. You choose the people around you very carefully. And then obviously how you spend your time and the people with whom you spend your time is from a professional standpoint the next. And then all of the sea of cascading of decisions. And it doesn't mean I don't get down. I will have had by the time this airs a major disappointment professionally, and it's very very painful when you give everything your all. You want to always win.
Mm-hmm.
On the flip side of that, if you wake up every day with that strong positive mental attitude, you're gritty, you fight through, until it's the last out in the ninth inning, you fight and give it all you got. There's some solace in knowing you've left it all on the field, and you have to know that you're going to win some and you're going to lose some.
Yeah.
And that's just the way it goes.
Thanks again for listening to Quick Hits, a healthcare technology podcast for healthcare technology professionals. Follow us on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, and don't forget to reach out to us with feedback, suggestions, or even people in the healthcare technology industry you think we should interview. Send an email to quickhits@healthdatamovers.com.